What's up, everybody? Noble Comics here. Today I want to talk about the most hated Marvel characters of all time. Now, obviously this list is going to be somewhat subjective, but I did look at posts and forums and rankings and everything on this topic, as well as my own personal beliefs, to put together this top 5 of the most hated Marvel characters of all time. And so let's start with number 5, which is going to be Mr. Fantastic. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about how the Fantastic Four are pretty underrated and overlooked as a property in Marvel, but Mr. Fantastic doesn't quite fit that bill because unlike people like The Thing, who are just sort of underrated, Mr. Fantastic is actively hated by a large portion of the comic book fan base. And there are a few reasons for that, but a lot of that just comes down to his personality. He's an extremely arrogant character. He's kind of a huge asshole to people, which is to a degree understandable because he is this super genius. But because of that, also he prioritizes work over family all the time, doesn't treat his wife very well, he's kind of a jerk to her, overall bad husband, and he's really just more interested in like the greater good type concept thing, rather than just being there, being a hero with his family and his friends, and sort of getting out of his own way. On top of that, the Civil War storyline kind of split the fan base on a number of characters, and Mr. Fantastic was one of them. He joined the Superhero Registration Act team, right? And the rest of his family joined the Resistance, so he was at odds with his family. He obviously joined the less popular side from the fan base's perspective, which sort of just added to the fact that he is this sort of mightier than thou, altruistic asshole type character that a lot of people just don't like. But even whenever he's not like that, even when he's just a normal character, a lot of people still don't like him because that Marvel First Family 60s feel of like everything's all goody-goody and nice, even that a lot of people find off-putting. They don't like how insincere it can feel at times, or just sort of fake, I guess. So no matter how you slice it, Mr. Fantastic is one of those characters people just don't like. Moving on to number 4, we have Jane Foster Thor. Now, Jane Foster obviously was a big part of Thor's lore. He was sort of the love interest woman who played a pretty big role in his stories overall. But starting in, I believe it was 2014, she actually did become Thor. She got declared worthy. She became Thor, replacing the main actual Thor in the comics. And this trope of swapping out the main hero with sort of a quote-unquote like diversity hire, either a woman or a person of color, something like that, was still relatively new at the time. She was one of the first earliest sort of swapped characters, and people just didn't really like that. People liked Thor, the real Thor. They didn't want this rip-off woman Thor. And it was weird too because Thor is not like a title like Spider-Man or something like that. Thor's just the dude's name, so I don't know why she would also take that name. Why can't she just have her own name? It makes no sense. But it was sort of this change that nobody really asked for. But it was pushed pretty heavily. She had her own series, she showed up in other people's series, and it was like this artificial popularity that just nobody likes. And everyone's sitting here wondering, like, why are we doing this? Why can't we just have normal Thor back? And to make it worse, her storylines weren't even good. Not all of them, but a number of them were focused on the fact that, you know, she's the new Thor and she's a woman and da-da-da, she's better than the old one, people like her more than the old one. You know, that sort of like I'm better than the original type of thing that nobody likes also. She was just a poor replacement for what came before, and it really felt very forced, and it, again, was not something anybody asked for, and even in the stories, it was very rarely focused on the character or focused on a good story, and it was more focused on how she's different and why you should like her, and again, this sort of forced popularity of the character. Moving on to number 3, we have Ironheart. Now, this is actually very similar to Jane Foster, as Ironheart is a sort of diversity replacement of Iron Man. Now, of course, Iron Man didn't actually get replaced. Ironheart is a different character, but it is this, you know, young black woman Iron Man, essentially, right? Just kind of stealing his look and tech and everything like that. But Ironheart is arguably even less popular than Jane Foster because the personality of Ironheart is probably worse. Extremely arrogant and an annoying personality. That sort of in-your-face entitlement you get from a lot of these like diversity swap characters. And they push very heavily these sort of like always better than the original type of thing where, oh, she made the Iron Man suit, even younger, and she's even smarter than he is, and she's even better than he is, and everything like that, comparing to Iron Man. Which again, nobody likes when the hero that they actually like is disrespected by the replacement that just showed up, right? And also comparing to Jane Foster, at least while that was going on, Thor had an extremely popular and cool story, that Unworthy Thor storyline that a lot of people liked, so their main character still had an outlet for the fans. But with Ironheart, one, she never really got to take off, and then Iron Man didn't really have anything cool going on either on his side. And there's no end of the character like there was with Jane Foster, her like, giving up the Thor power, dying of cancer, everything like that. At least the character had an ending. With Ironheart, there really is no ending, and no matter how much they try and force the character, like they put her in Black Panther 2, nobody cared. They put her in the comics, nobody cared. She is like one of the best examples of a failed character. And there's been a lot of failed characters in the last 10 years, roughly. But she is one of the best examples of a character that just failed to launch, that they thought was going to be popular, but really was unpopular. Nobody liked her, nobody read the books. She was extremely unappealing in pretty much every way, and so she flopped. And the comic readers and the fans hated her. Moving on to number 2, we have Captain Marvel. This is Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel. Now, a lot of people hate Captain Marvel as she is now, and there's a few reasons for that, but I want to go back a little bit, because the character Carol Danvers was in the comics a lot longer than maybe people think of, because they think of her as in her current form, which is sort of a mirror to her movie appearance. But for a while, she was known as Miss Marvel, and she was a pretty popular and relatively successful sort of B-list hero character. Though she was a lot different than she was now, with the main thing being her costume. You look at the costume of the old Miss Marvel, it's definitely a look, right? It's obviously a little bit of objectification, it's a little skimpy, everything like that. I get it. If you've got like a problem with that, if you're a feminist or whatever, and you're like, I don't like how that looks. It's like, well, it's not for you, right? These are comics, they're for primarily male audience. And so that's what she looked like. And again, she was relatively popular. No one really had a problem with her. But I think it was around 2012, they made the transition from Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel. And we started defining the character that we see today, which is mirrored by Brie Larson on the big screen. And this rework of the character was Marvel's attempt to capture some of that market that, say, Wonder Woman inhabits, of having this female empowerment type character, something for girls to look up to or latch onto in the comic book scene. And it was obvious that this was the case, that this was sort of an agenda character where we're trying to appeal to, this girl audience, which doesn't really exist, definitely not in large enough numbers to make it worth it. Regardless, though, her character was shoved into the spotlight a lot more often. She's definitely a lot more prominent in the comic books, and like her power level, everything like that has been increasing to make her more competitive with the best that Marvel has to offer. And on top of all that, she did get her movie. Like I said, Brie Larson portrays her in the movies, and that did not help her popularity. A lot of people didn't like the Captain Marvel movies. A lot of people don't like Brie Larson, and so that didn't really help. Then you have the comics mirroring that, where it's a lot of lectures and a lot of girl power, boys suck type of thing. And it really was just not a good look, definitely not a good transformation for the character. And on top of that, they gave her the Civil War II storyline, that book where she comes out looking terrible as well. I know a lot of people didn't read Civil War II or didn't like it, but it did paint her in a pretty bad light, where they're doing this new sort of moral dilemma like they did with Civil War I. But in this case, Captain Marvel was the bad guy beating up on Iron Man. And at this point, Iron Man's a much more popular character. People really didn't like her after that. So after her rebrand, she became a lot more political, which people don't like, and she hasn't had any good actual storylines where she doesn't come across like super annoying and terrible. They honestly should have just kept her the way she was before, and she would be vastly more popular than she is today. But regardless, that is why Captain Marvel is one of the most hated characters that Marvel has ever put out. Now, before we get to number 1, I do have a few honorable mentions here. Hank Pym, a lot of people really hate Hank Pym. He's kind of a terrible person, even though he's one of the OG Avengers as Ant-Man. He's had a lot of bad showings, a lot of bad personality traits, and a lot of people don't like him. Cyclops as well, a lot of people don't like. There's been a resurgence in Cyclops' popularity since X-Men '97, but in the comics he's always been seen as like a stick in the mud, very stuffy. super unfun character. And lastly, probably like all of the Inhumans. Nobody likes the Inhumans. They're such a flopped property that everyone just seems to universally dislike. But all that out of the way, let's get on to number one, the most hated character in all of Marvel Comics has to be Paul. And look, you know Paul, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody hates Paul. Now, I know this is kind of old news at this point. It's been like 2 years since Paul first showed up in Spider-Man comics, but if we're talking the character that has received the most hate in all of Marvel, I have never seen anything like the hate that this guy received whenever he was revealed in Spider-Man. There's been nothing like it. Other characters have had hate on and off for years and everything like that. The campaign against Paul was insane. And the crazy thing is, it has almost nothing to do with who the character is. It is more of who this character or what this character represents coming from Marvel. So if you don't know, there was a Spider-Man run, right, where Spider-Man and Mary Jane are doing very well. They're together, they're moving forward in their relationship, they're moving in together. Spider-Man bought a ring, he's getting ready to propose. This is what all Spider-Man fans have wanted since like the 60s, is Spider-Man and Mary Jane together. They're the ultimate comic book couple, maybe only rivaled by like Superman and Lois Lane. And then, out of nowhere, next issue, Spider-Man and Mary Jane are not together, and Mary Jane is married to this dude Paul, and they like have children. You know, there's a bit of a time skip there, but it's like, what happened? What happened to that storyline that was heading in such a good direction for these two characters? Now we have this random dude Paul just shows up, and he's married to Mary Jane. Just completely blindsides the readers, completely derails this story. Totally stupid. It's like, what was the point of all that? What were we even building towards? And this is a big problem with Spider-Man in general, of not allowing the character to like get what he wants, not allowing the character to progress and grow. And this is just another part of that. This is a representation of the very worst that Marvel has to offer, especially whenever it comes to Spider-Man, of just, why would you do that? You know, it's just such a brain dead, insane decision that they went with for this character. And look, I know since then Paul has gotten more of a story, right? They attempt to give him like a story and hit abilities, and he's a super genius and da-da-da. But all of that pretty much falls flat. There's no redemption for the character. I'm not going to become a fan of the character just because, well, no, like there's a reason he's here. There's a reason he exists. This other universe, and he's from another Earth. And it's like, I don't care. What I care about is the fact that you ruined a great Spider-Man story with this random plot device character for no reason, just because you guys suck and you hate Spider-Man for whatever reason. It was very disappointing, to say the least, and came across as a huge FU to actual Spider-Man fans and readers of the comic. So no, he's not like a woman beater, or he didn't commit any war crimes or anything like that, like some of these other characters on the list, but his flaw is deeper than that, right? It's deeper than just like an in-universe problem, which there definitely is an in-universe problem of him taking Mary Jane from Spider-Man, but it's a deeper flaw of Marvel Comics, the writers, the editors, and the attitude that they have towards this character and storytelling in general. He's very indicative of a wider problem and manifests that very well here as being such a terrible decision of a character to insert. But that is just my list, my opinion here of the top 5 most hated Marvel characters of all time. Be sure to let me know what you think. Who do you think is the most hated Marvel character ever? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.